Tala had always felt out of place, even among her own people. She had been born into the harsh world of the Apache, where strength and resilience were praised and beauty was often seen as a blessing. But Tala was different. She was scarred, not just physically but emotionally, and she often wondered why no man ever looked her way. It had all started years ago when her family had been attacked by a group of raiders. Her father had tried to fight them off, but the odds were against him. In the chaos, Tala had been hurt, a deep cut on her face that never fully healed, leaving her with a permanent reminder of that horrible night. Since then, things had changed. Her tribe had looked at her differently, and despite her beauty, she felt like an outsider. The elders had whispered about her, calling her a symbol of bad luck. Many men who had once shown interest in her had suddenly disappeared, their affections turned elsewhere. Tala had spent her younger years running after a dream that would never come true. Now, as an adult, she felt the sting of rejection even more. Tala had been to many villages seeking work, but each place had given her the same cold treatment. She'd spent countless nights sleeping under the stars, her heart heavy with the weight of loneliness. But it was in the deep forests, alone and with no particular place to go, that Tala realized something. She would have to make her own way, for no one would give her a chance. She had long ago stopped expecting anything more. One morning, as she wandered through a narrow canyon, she saw something that caught her attention. A small ranch nestled on the edge of a hill. It was a quiet, lonely place just like her. She had passed it many times, but today, there was something different about it. Maybe it was the storm clouds gathering in the distance or the silence that hung in the air, but something drew her in. She needed food. And more than that, she needed a place to rest. The days had been long and exhausting, and her body ached. Her stomach growled, and she decided to approach the ranch. As she got closer, she saw the figure of a man working near a small barn. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and he looked like he had been at work all day. His face was weathered, but there was something kind in his eyes as he caught sight of her approaching. He put down his tools and walked toward her. "You look like you've been through a lot," the man said. His voice was deep and rough, but his tone was gentle. "Come on in. I have food, and you're welcome to rest for the night." Tala was hesitant. She had learned to be wary of strangers, but there was something about him that made her feel safe. Maybe it was his kindness, or maybe it was the fact that he didn't look at her with judgment like the others always did. She nodded and followed him inside. The man, who introduced himself as Jack, was a rancher who lived alone. He had lost his family years ago in a tragic accident. Since then, he had become a solitary figure, working the land and trying to keep the memories at bay. He offered Tala a seat at his table, and they ate together in silence, the only sound coming from the wind outside. After dinner, Jack showed her to a small room in the back of the house where she could rest. It wasn't much, but it was warm and dry, and Tala was grateful. She had no idea what she had expected from this place, but she never imagined she would be treated so kindly. Jack had asked for nothing in return, and that confused her. Why had he offered her this help? She didn't understand. The next morning, she awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside. Jack was already at work when she stepped out onto the porch. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "If you're feeling up to it, I could use a hand with the chores," he said. "I could use some company around here, and it would make things go faster." Tala didn't hesitate. She had worked hard all her life, and this ranch was no different. She had never been afraid of hard work, and she quickly got to work, gathering firewood, feeding the animals, and helping Jack with the daily tasks. It felt good to be doing something useful, something that mattered. She felt alive again. As the days passed, Tala stayed at the ranch. She helped Jack with everything from fixing fences to tending the small garden out back. Slowly but surely, a bond began to form between them. Jack was quiet, but he didn't shy away from conversation. He would tell stories of his past, of his family, of the mistakes he had made and the regrets he carried with him. Tala listened, fascinated by the way he spoke, as though he had nothing to hide. She told him about her life too, but she didn't go into too much detail. She didn't need to. Jack didn't ask about her past. He didn't look at her with pity or disgust. He simply accepted her for who she was. That was something she had never known before. One night, as they sat together by the fire, Tala looked at Jack and saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't pity or even affection. It was understanding. She had always feared that someone would one day pity her for what she had become, but Jack didn't do that. He had given her a place to stay, and in return, She had given him companionship, and together they created a routine that was simple and comforting. But despite the quiet peace that had settled over her, Tala still couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't meant to be here. She still felt like an outsider, a stranger. She still feared that Jack would grow tired of her, just like everyone else had. One evening, as they worked together in the barn, Tala finally spoke what had been on her mind. "You don't have to keep me here, you know," she said softly. "I'm not the woman you think I am. I'm just someone who's been left behind." Jack stopped working and looked at her, his face softening. "Tala, you're not just someone who's been left behind. You're someone who's found her way here, and that's all that matters." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so long thinking of herself as someone who didn't belong anywhere. But here, in this small, quiet ranch, Jack had shown her that she was more than just her past. She was someone who had a future, and maybe, just maybe, she could have a life that was her own. As the days grew longer, Tala found herself adjusting to a life she never thought was possible. The harshness of the outside world had always made her feel small, but in Jack's presence there was no judgment, only understanding. The daily tasks on the ranch became a comfort, and she began to take pride in her work. There was something deeply fulfilling about tending to the animals and fixing the fences, something that made her feel like she was contributing to something greater than herself. Jack, too, seemed to find a new rhythm in life. His once solitary existence, filled with the weight of old memories, slowly began to shift. Tala's presence, though unspoken, brought a new light to the ranch. They worked side by side, and over time, their routine turned into a quiet, harmonious dance. There was no need for words between them. They understood each other perfectly. They had both suffered losses, and in each other, they found a kind of solace they had never known before. However, despite the calm and peace that settled between them, Tala couldn't help but feel a lingering fear that haunted her every step. She had been rejected her entire life, first by her tribe and then by the men who had once shown interest in her. What if Jack, too, saw her as nothing more than a temporary solution to his loneliness? What if one day he decided he didn't need her anymore? Her insecurities plagued her thoughts, but she didn't know how to express them. She was afraid that if she voiced her doubts, it would push Jack away. So instead of talking about it, she threw herself into the work even more. Every day she worked tirelessly, hoping that if she kept busy enough, she could keep the fear at bay. But one evening, everything changed. It had been a long day, and the sky was turning a deep shade of purple as the sun began to set. The cool breeze made the air feel refreshing after a long day of labor. Jack and Tala were in the barn, stacking hay bales and preparing the animals for the night. There was a gentle rhythm to their work, and for the first time in a long while, Tala felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known in years. As they finished their work, Jack stopped and turned to her. His expression was serious, but his eyes held something softer, something that made Tala's heart beat faster. "Tala," Jack began, his voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I need to say it." Tala's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what he was going to say, but the uncertainty made her pulse race. She tried to keep her emotions in check, but her hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron. Jack took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving her. "I know you've been through a lot, and I can see that you're not the same as the woman who walked through my door all those weeks ago. You're strong, and you're capable, and you've brought something here I never thought I'd find again. I've gotten used to having you here, Tala. I don't want you to leave." The words hung in the air between them, and Tala stood frozen. She wasn't sure if she had heard him right. She had expected rejection, as she always had. She had expected him to tell her that she was just a temporary companion, that when things settled she would be sent on her way. But instead, Jack was saying something different. He was saying that he wanted her to stay, that he didn't want to be alone anymore. A wave of emotions washed over her, relief, confusion, and something deeper, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain what she was feeling? How could she express the gratitude she had for this man who had given her a home when she had nowhere else to go? Jack smiled softly, sensing her hesitation. "I know this isn't easy for you. I can tell you've been through things I'll never fully understand. But I want you to know that here with me you're not an outsider. You have a place. I don't want to go back to being alone, Tala." Tala felt her heart swell at his words. The fear that had gripped her for so long began to loosen, bit by bit. She had spent so many years wondering if anyone would ever accept her, wondering if she would ever be seen for who she truly was. But Jack saw her. He saw past the scars and the loneliness, and he was offering her something that she had never thought possible, a future. Tala took a deep breath and finally found her voice. I don't know how to thank you, Jack. I don't know how to make sense of everything that's happened between us. But I know I don't want to go anywhere either. I don't want to be alone anymore. Jack's eyes softened and he took a step closer to her. You're not alone, Tala. You never will be again. In that moment, something inside Tala shifted. She had spent so many years carrying the weight of her past, of the belief that she wasn't worthy of love or acceptance. But Jack had shown her that she didn't have to carry that burden anymore. He had opened his heart to her, and in doing so, he had given her the chance to open hers as well. As they stood there in the barn, the sound of crickets and the distant howling of coyotes filling the night air, Tala realized that she was no longer just surviving. She was living. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that she deserved to be happy. The next morning, the sun rose over the ranch with a warm glow, signaling the beginning of a new chapter. Jack and Tala worked side by side, their bond stronger than ever. Tala's fears of being rejected began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence she had never known. She had found a place where she was accepted, where she was wanted, and for the first time she felt like she was truly home. As the days passed, their relationship continued to grow. It wasn't a perfect story, and there were still challenges to face, but they faced them together. Tala's past no longer defined her. She had found a future, and it was with Jack. Together they had built something beautiful from the brokenness of their pasts. And as the seasons changed, they both knew that they had found something more precious than they had ever dreamed possible. A love built on understanding, trust, and the simple joy of being with someone who truly cared.